歡迎收聽. Oh, wait a minute. Today's episode is yet another English episode because it is the KISMIF special. Yes. But, and we'd also very much like to thank our venue sponsor, I guess. It's the CUHK, Chinese University of Hong Kong Chung Photography Society, of which their dark room where they process their film and do their shoots and stuff. This is their room, and they very graciously let us use it. So on the off chance that you are a undergraduate student at CUHK, please check them out. All right, so today is a very special episode because we are very lucky to be joined by everyone here who was in KISMIF, a punk conference in Porto, Portugal. And so, let's introduce you. In Porto, we had a panel where we discussed different indie scenes and music scenes amongst Hong Kong, Taiwan, China, and the rest of Asia as well. It was four of us were presenting, as well as Zhao Yufei was not here, but it's okay. And Chung was here to listen to the panel. And so actually today he is going to be the host of this podcast. And so you don't need to listen to me talk so much anymore, which is great. And so, Chung, can you introduce yourself quickly?
Hi, everyone. So my name is Chung. I just passed my Viva for my PhD. I study at University of Liverpool. My research is about the idea of indie independent in Chinese term is Duli. So how it's been interpreted within the Chinese popular music discourse from the music maker's perspective. So that's my introduction. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks. Okay. I am John from Gong Indie. So I presented in the conference about how the indie scene is looking outside of the previous limitations of the scene and trying to make new paths towards Asia, the rest of Asia, for touring, and how that is changing the way that people see indie in Hong Kong and even just Hong Kong identity in general.
Hi, so my name is Mick Vierbergen. I'm from the Netherlands originally, but I study here in Hong Kong. My research is about music and performance scenes in Shanghai, and on the paper at KISMIF, I presented about some indie bands that I've interviewed, and I was looking at how their dreams for their DIY careers, really, how they align with like digital platforms, companies, and also like the national aspirations, like the Chinese dreams. So I'm looking at basically like the dreams of small up-and-coming bands in China, Shanghai.
Hi everyone, I'm Miaoju from Taiwan, and I'm a long-time researcher of indie music in Taiwan and also in China, East Asia. And this time I present my recent study of the rising wave of indie music in Taiwan, especially in a specific context of the government subsidy policy. So that changed the nature of independent music in Taiwan. So I will look at the influence of the subsidy policy for Taiwan's indie music scene.
Hi, my name is Francois. I'm based here in Hong Kong at the Hong Kong Baptist University. I'm a researcher of popular music, I would say broadly, experimental indie music. I would add to that I do that in maybe cultural minority contexts, we might call it that. And at KISMIF, I presented on, I think, if I remember correctly, on the ways in which social media platforms, specific, whether it's Facebook or DIY platforms, are used by the Hong Kong indie music scene to create knowledge about the scene. So that's what I did.
Cool. So one more thing on the agenda is that Miaoju, this is how many times have you been to Hong Kong so far?
Wow, how many times? I forgot, maybe more than 5 times.
Right. And you haven't had an egg tart before. A Hong Kong style egg tart.
Hong Kong style, Hong Kong style egg tart I ate in Taiwan,
Right.
not in Hong Kong.
But not in Hong Kong.
Not
Okay.
a real Hong Kong
Not
actor.
the real. Okay.
Okay, so
Whoa.
today
No,
we,
this is
have
surprise.
very
Wow.
very local style egg tarts that we can all have.
Okay.
And we're gonna record your.
Only
You're gonna do a live review.
Live.
Yeah.
Oh my
Okay.
god.
Just
Wow.
for the context,
It's
in
like
Porto
a
we also had some
foodie.
actor. Did you have the actors in Porto though?
Import, sure, of course.
Okay,
the
but just
color
not the
looks
Hong
really
Kong one.
different.
Yeah.
The egg yolk looks much brighter
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
a Hong Kong style.
I-
They have
Egg
a more
tart.
like creme brulee.
Wow.
That's right, that's right.
In
Yeah,
Portugal,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's more custardy, I
Yeah.
think, in Portugal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cheers.
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 Egg tart. Cheers. Nice.
Very good.
Yeah. Yeah. It's warm.
Yeah, so I think these are more eggy, right? And the Portugal ones are more custardy.
Mm.
I think so.
Yeah.
It's very smooth.
Very
Yeah.
silky smooth.
Yeah. Not less sweet because the Portugal one is very sweet. Yeah.
That's true.
So now you've been to Hong Kong.
I think that's the best compliment in Asia to discuss about dessert. Not too sweet.
That is
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
In Europe, that would be different.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
If
Yeah.
it's not too sweet, then it's probably not
Yeah.
good.
Yeah,
Like
then
the-
what's the point?
Yeah, what's the point of
true,
eating a
that's true.
dessert?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
I noticed that like one time we're kind of having like a dinner together and I ordered like a cake
Yeah.
and that cake was made by a Chinese person.
Yeah.
And then all the Chinese students, they were having the cake and they were like, oh, this is not too sweet. And then I guess there's like a
Yeah.
UK guy just
Yeah.
asking, what does that mean? And I said, that's the best compliment because it's not too sweet. So in a way, it's healthy.
Yeah.
How did he find it?
Yeah.
Good.
And today we're also joined by a very small crew of audience, kind of, behind us who are not just only making sure that the cameras are rolling, but mainly also making sure that we don't talk in ways that people don't understand, as academics always do. So they may interject with questions if we do go off the rails a little bit, which is very possible.
No swear words, right?
You can swear. I'll just,
Okay, we can swear.
I think so. I mean, I might get creative with the beeps and stuff.
Can I
but-
swear in Dutch?
Also, we would be beeped if we swear. Maybe we should swear just to get to the beeps
I think
in the final product.
I think you're testing my patience with the editing process. I might just not do it in the end.
How
I'm
many
like,
Very difficult for you.
I fucking love podcasts. I'll start now.
there we go. Yeah. Fuck yeah. All right. So over to you.
Yes, so actually I prepared some general questions. I think that's gonna help to for us to move forward. So just for now, could you guys, four of you, give us a few sentences to describe what indie means to you personally? Do you have any examples?
I can start.
Yes,
In,
go ahead.
in personally, right? Just what it
yes.
means in my life. Or,
Yes, exactly.
For me, I think it just means thinking for myself.
Thinking for yourself.
That's the primary thing that I get from it, and I guess the reason why I was also attracted to indie music writ large. Just people trying to do things mindfully aware of the problems with the music industry generally, and trying to do things differently, to also do music to build community, to bring people together. That's something that's always been meaningful to me, just the feeling of being part of a group of people with similar values or interests or ways of looking at the world. I think that's what indie means to me.
Okay.
And I found that in different places. I'm from France originally, so I had initially found that in France and the South. Like, metal hardcore kind of community. In Canada, I definitely found it when I was doing my schooling in university, my PhD, the experimental kind of free improv, post-rock kind of community of indie people. And in Hong Kong, I did as well with, and in Hong Kong and Asia, I should say. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Meryl?
But indie for me is thinking independently, especially by myself, and because I think in Taiwan or in Chinese culture, everyone belongs to a group and follow the rule of the society. But thinking independently means you need to thinking critically, in a critical way, to reflect every rule you need to obey and think about why. So thinking independently for me is to reflect the rule and find your own way how to survive in the society for yourself. So that's what I mean, the independent for me. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think, of course, like I completely agree with that. And maybe I just want to add, it's not just independently, like as in individually, but I think what you also said, like more of a community building. And I think, it has like definitely some kind of like self-awareness or critical reflection on society or awareness of like larger structures and how you what's your stance towards that. But yeah, it's also not only about like yourself as an individual, but also like the community. So it's not just do it yourself, but also do it together. Yeah, so maybe that's also like what for me is part of the term indie, but maybe we'll go into this later. I think there's also a different contextual meaning in at least Europe, where I'm from, or by larger the West and maybe Chinese context. So.
I think for me, it's a very sentimental definition because I think I entered the indie scene kind of in a way as part of my own political awareness, in the sense that as I analyze, many people have discovered the indie scene because they're looking for culture, and the reason why they're looking for culture is because they find that because of events in society and changes in society, that they realize that the culture that they were consuming, the music, for example, is not sufficient to express what they want to express, or for them to participate in the activities in in society in the way that they want to. And I think that in my context, it would sound quite overly sentimental probably, but to me it's hope. I think for a lot of people it's hope, not just in the way that music is in one sense, not like like expressed through lyrics or anything, or only through lyrics I should say. I think it's more expressed a lot through the way that people do things in the indie scene, the way that people choose, the different choices that they make in activities related to indie scene, how they have found their agency, or their will, their ability to act through the indie scene.
What do you mean by agency?
That I stopped myself when I said that word, and I was like, agency. You see, there are a lot of companies called marketing agents. No, not quite, but agency, I think it's especially in Hong Kong where I think the control, the way that people, the amount that people feel like they can change the world or just the society around them is getting smaller and smaller. And I think that in a way, participation and initiative, doing things with their own initiative in the indie scene gives them the ability to feel like, hey, you know what, I can actually change things. I can do things for a wider a community than myself or my friend circle. You know, like I can affect change. I can make things different. And I think, you know, that's why indie to me is a form of hope. Yes.
A form of hope, yeah. So we kind of hear different ideas and the concept, like just based on for response based on these questions. And I think in a way indie is also very subjective, right? Because it really means different things to different people, different generations. Where they're from, what kind of music they're into at the beginning, and that all change how people think about it. So I guess that's why also it's very fascinating in a way, because like it's just you can think about things, and then you have your own feeling and your will, your ideas towards them, but then at the same time everyone sharing the same term, indie, and that's the power of indie in a way, I think. Yes. So, and then I will have my second question. So during the field work or through the study, so every time if you guys interact with musicians or the professionals, when you talk about indie, what sort of dimension that they are engaging with the idea of indie, that they're discussing? So, you know, when we talk about indie, what they might actually talking about? This is my second question.
Okay. Yeah, if I may answer. So I interviewed a couple of like up and coming bands in Shanghai. They're not very big or established. I especially wanted to look at the more smaller ones that are working on their careers, and I looked at what kind of discourses they're using. What are discourses? So basically,
what discourse? Again, expand.
Basically, like the way in which they use like language and terms like indie, and how they motivate their career choices. I was also looking especially at platforms, so how they use digital platforms basically as tools in their career. And I found actually that like terms like indie, they're used in several different ways. So I think historically there's of course like there is this kind of notion of independence, right? So it is you doing something for yourself that is not that much related to commercial or more formal governmental things. I guess like that is maybe the imagination of that term. And that is also really kind of connected to the idea of authenticity, right? To be authentically yourself and to express yourself. So that is maybe like the core of the term indie. But I also saw like that actually these bands are also using it in a quite entrepreneurial way. And entrepreneurial independence is something like it's a different dimension of it, I think. That is perhaps like coming up a bit more, especially because of these platforms that are kind of channeling bands and musicians to compete with each other in certain ways, and you know, to kind of like self-promote. And also like professionalization is another dimension of that, I think. So bands, because of like the technology is becoming more and more professional, more high quality, professionalization is also kind of like this imperative almost. Yeah, so those are like a different dimension. I think convenience is actually also something that came up, particularly in China. I think this term always kind of comes up in relation to platforms or digital technologies. It's just very convenient to be able to upload your songs to a platform and, you know, share it with your fans. So yeah, I think those are maybe a couple of the dimensions of the term. And maybe you guys have any comments or?
Okay, sure. As for me, because my research topic always be indie music. So I teach in the university, so I have several chances to give a talk or attend a forum to talk about indie music. So in Taiwan, the general public will think about, indie music is like a music style. Yeah, there is a music style different from the the mainstream pop, different from the pop song, that might be indie music. So the first aspect is it's kind of music style, and the other aspect related to the music style is in Taiwan now indie music kind of like indie pop. So there are many young students, young people will say, "Oh, I don't listen to the pop, but I listen to indie." So that kind of saying make indie music just like a hipster culture. So indie music has another meaning like hipster culture. But as when I doing the field study in the indie music scene, when I talk with the musician, they will think about, independent music, that is because we don't sign to the mainstream label. So they have deeper sense about what is indie music means. That means they maybe run their own label. They just a very small one. They don't sign to the major label. So that is the insider and the professional. They have that kind of sense. But for me, as a scholar to doing research, I think that's only make it one or first meaning of indie music. What I presume is the real independent spirit of indie music. That's what I think. Thinking independently and doing independently, that is not just a music style. That is the ethic, that is a real practice to keep your independence. So I think that is
Don't
another...
you think that's a little bit like romanticized?
Yeah, every time.
Nowadays?
Just like this time in Porto, I think that there is like that's the same thing. Why I am always be questioned about I'm too romantic to... Do you think so?
Well, no, because like what I was saying before, like I think there's also like an independent entrepreneurial aspect to it. So I think that the idea of indie as purely authentic and coming from the
It's an aspiration, isn't it? I mean, that's the core motivation to do these things.
Yeah,
It's an ideal.
it's an ideal.
Unattainable as any other ideal, I
Yeah.
guess. But I think it's undeniably there, whether we want to be cynical about it or not.
Yeah.
It's part of it, I think.
But when I think about it, I will always think about why I love this music. I can feel the spirit of this music. So when I feel the spirit have some independent idea, independent thinking, that will touch me. So I think just a very simple feeling, not that romantic, I think.
So, bouncing back after what my lovely conversationalists have mentioned, I think I'm thinking hard actually in my work. When do the people that I talk to ever use the term indie? And I think it's not often, as a matter of fact. Not a lot of the people I know will claim indie. And I think that's for a number of different reasons. I think if it's artists, they usually like to position themselves a little bit more specifically, because indie has become such a broad umbrella term, and stylistically refers to so many different things potentially, as you said, Miaoju, right? Like in certain contexts, people have kind of automatic associations with a sound or something, like might be indie pop, or in other places, if I'm thinking of like one place where I did field work, which is Montreal, if you say indie, it's kind of assumed that it's some kind of indie rock. That's and I feel that's probably the origin of the term. We need Dave Hesbandash here to walk us through his articles. But so, in other words, I don't find that the term comes up very often, and I personally don't push it either. My understanding, or at least my approach, particularly when I talk about Hong Kong, is that indie is a plurality of style. It's definitely not one style or genre of music, but it's really more about a way of making music and a spirit, I think. A way of producing, distributing music, which is different, again, from what the mainstream industries might be doing. But that is rarely actually the focus of what people talk about explicitly. And I'm thinking about my informants for the paper that I did at KISMIF, since that's the focus today. I don't think I put the question to them, what do you think indie is? I don't think they brought it up. As far as I know, none of them actually brand themselves as indie, whether it's Zenegeist or the What's Good Music Awards or
IndieCast.
IndieCast.
But they they don't really, I feel like with IndieCast, it's just a name.
Yeah.
Like they don't really, it's not like they brand the word indie really strongly into all of their marketing stuff.
But it does signal a kind of positioning. But so I lie, at least in that particular corner of my research, that the term is there. But it's not, I really should say that it's not something that people discuss. So at this point, either it's taken for granted that, people know what we're talking about this, or it has become kind of void of specific substance, and so people move on to other things pretty quickly.
It's just the boring academics that keep holding on to this term and try to define it.
It's
trying very hard to find what it means.
But I think
it's just spent 4 years on this term.
Yeah, but that's exactly why I think it's still valuable, right? Because it's so flexible and so fluid in terms of what it refers to, that it maintains a kind of currency or value, because it allows us to talk about so many different things. But when you try to really pin it down and say what it is, it's so slippery. And
just disappear.
So that's why I think some people kind of move away from it, because it's just too slippery to really say anything specific enough for what they want to do. But it's there. Of course it's there. I think it's, again, like terms like underground or scene or, it's
alternative.
We will never do away with those terms, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's all just quite murky water anyway.
But that's why I think those terms will always be there. And will always pose problems to people.
And they're adapting. I think that's also important. I think like the meaning is definitely changing as well. My research about underground is also looking into that, but the term indie is also definitely changing. And I think perhaps also like in terms of like different national contexts, it means different things. Like, of course, you gotta help me out here, but because your research, of course, you've like delved into this terminology and what it means in China a lot more than I have. But I think like from a Western perspective, indie kind of came from like alternative production networks.
Comes out of punk. Comes out of punk.
That were like specifically going against like the more established, I think the big five labels in a Western context. But then in China, like there were not these kind of big labels like Sony and what is it?
The five.
Well, they have them, but they're just not as...
Well, I mean like talking about 20, 30 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Because of like, there's like this national borders, and these companies that weren't really able to operate in the same way. They didn't have that kind of position in China. Actually, it was a lot more fragmented, a lot more smaller labels from Taiwan and Hong Kong. So there was not really a kind of like unified, industry in that sense, except of course there was like Cantopop and Mandopop as the kind of mainstream alternative. So in China, Duli or Duli Yaogun indie rock has perhaps like a less strong, how to say, like a differentiation.
Emphasis.
Yeah. And so I think that translation is quite interesting. On the note of translation, when I was doing some of my interviews, one of the bands they were talking about 丁蟹, like they described themselves as 丁蟹. I was like, oh, what is 丁蟹? And I had a research assistant, and she also didn't know what it meant, because like the spiky shoes. What are spiky shoes? The shoegaze.
Spiky shoes.
Yeah. Very confusing.
That's awesome.
Spiky shoes.
Yeah, spiky shoes.
There we go.
Shoegaze.
Shoegaze.
But it's interesting, like how these terms, how they translate, and what kind of different meanings they have in different contexts.
Yeah, and it adds like another layer of the meaning based on this process.
Yeah, can I jump in? That I think this is really important, actually, that, you know, this term is being taken up and redefined, or at least prodded in different social, cultural contexts, like China or Hong Kong or different places. Because for so long, I think there was this kind of like monopoly of you know, indie being associated with kind of white Anglo-American males, potentially working, but usually middle to upper middle, right? And that was what indie was supposed to be about. And like that's at least in Western context, that's the associations that are made with the term almost automatically.
Yeah.
Even though, if again we talk about independence in music as not so much as music style, but as a way of self-organizing and producing and distributing music in alternative ways, there's countless examples that go before actually the rise of post-punk and when that term indie music started to be used, right? We have examples probably in different continents. In the US, there's African-American free jazz collectives that were doing DIY indie stuff way before punk happened in the 60s. But somehow the history of indie is always kind of, in most accounts, is always brought back to the lineage of punk and post-punk. So I think all of this work that is being done about indie in different places is necessary, really, to diversify, broaden the scope.
I think for me, what is interesting in my research about the touring activities of Hong Kong bands going out into East Asia and Southeast Asia, and vice versa, Southeast Asian and East Asian bands coming into Hong Kong, is that it seems like once they get out, even, to be honest, even inside of Hong Kong, a lot of bands don't want to say the word indie because, of course, in Hong Kong, the indie scene is quite fragmented, and you know, genre kind of groups, clusters, they kind of cluster together based on certain venues that they share, or you know, just the fact that there's no one single venue that can unite everyone anymore. And so people generally tend to use their own genres to label themselves, and a lot of bands also don't want to get boxed into the idea of indie, and they also feel like when they use the word indie, it actually, I'm not going to use the academic term, it solidifies the divide between mainstream and indie.
What's the academic word?
Reify.
Oh, reify.
I mean, it's not a big word, but it's an annoying word.
I still don't know what it means. So
making real, like solidifies, actually, I quite like that one. Yeah. But anyway, so it solidifies that dichotomy and that kind of like two-sidedness of mainstream and indie, where a lot of people that I know feel like people should not listen to music based on whether it's mainstream or indie. And in Hong Kong, because of the mainstream stylistically speaking, the mainstream is not as diverse as the indie scene. It's putting it very correctly, very, very friendly. And because of that, everything that isn't kind of that sort of style becomes indie, or perhaps we would be more likely to call it alternative. And these terms have been chucked around over the years. You know, maybe it used to be called the alternative scene, which is Leng Lo Yam Ngo, and then another times they might call it the underground music scene because of the way that the venues are run. And then other times nowadays, indie is more fashionable, and it's also converging with, you know, the Taiwan rise, the rise of Taiwanese indie music and Ting Tuan Zai. Like that sort of a culture. It's kind of spread into Hong Kong as well. And then, you know, some people, they really like Japanese indie bands or Korean indie bands, Southeast Asian indie bands from Thailand and Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, that sort of thing.
That seems to be rising more and more, right? This, to use yet again another academic-ish term, right? Interasia indie.
Now it's said.
Oh no, someone said Interasia. Drink.
Take a shot.
About how can we
We're avoiding that term.
Really?
No. We just talked about it before, like Interasia. But it's a good.
I mean, whether we want to label it Interasia, there is like this moment where, I mean, you know, we've all seen in Hong Kong posters these days about the Blank Slate Festival, which I guess is a punk festival. But the bill is, the lineup is, you know, like a band from Malaysia, a band from China, a band from Hong Kong, a band
from each.
Two from each.
I think
So,
it's like two
so
from
there's a real obvious, visible intent to make it a kind of regional festival for punk music. See how I use regional and not the other word?
But can I add more? Because my latest article, I review the change of independence music in the 21st century. So I think nowadays the meaning of indie music is a little bit, not a little bit, it's totally different, because there is many critical reason is technological affordance. That is the big word. Sorry.
Affordance.
There we go.
Technology help indie music become more common. So nowadays, when you say you're doing music independently, that is not a big meaning, because everyone can use very cheap,
very true,
digital.
Like it just means you drag and drop your MP3s onto
So
website.
everyone, you can recording at your room. That is the first one. And second, you can upload to the music streaming individually. You can just pay very few to the distributor. Then you can upload to the music streaming platform. So nowadays, on the Spotify, any music streaming platform, there are so many unknown musicians.
And independent.
Yeah,
as well,
independent.
right? Like by the classic definition.
Yeah.
Somebody doing like mainstream pop of whatever denomination by themselves with their own little DAW and uploading it. That actually fits the definition of how indie used to sort of do things. It stylistically has nothing to do, of course, with, or perhaps the spirit is not quite the same. I don't know.
Actually, I'd like to bring up the example of a record shop / I guess we can call them a label, called Desperate Infant Records, which has a shop actually right next to the live house where we were at last night. And he kind of specializes in hardcore punk, those kind of styles, and he was talking about the way that they put out vinyl records, and that with vinyl records the cost of production is very high. We're talking, I don't want to put a number on it, but let's just say the margin is not great. So it costs a lot of upfront investment, and the MOQ, the minimum order quantity, is actually quite high for some people or some bands, some labels that don't have a guaranteed feeling of like, we will sell X amount, so what he was telling me was that he kind of has, not he has formed, but he's part of a collective in an informal way that has formed of different labels and record shops around Asia as well as beyond in Europe and where they all kind of, someone proposes like, hey, this band wants to put out a record, you know, like, what do you guys think? Will you guys order? And they kind of all contribute. They pledge like, okay, I will order 20, I will order 20, I will order 50, I will order 40. And then it all adds up. And then they end up getting a much better rate for the production of the records. They guarantee that the person who's actually paying the money to order the records in the first place, perhaps it's the band, they can guarantee at least they don't need to pay out of pocket.
Yeah.
And hold a bunch of unsold inventory in their bedroom for an undetermined amount of time until they get moved. And more so than that, the kind of byproduct or perhaps to the band it's the main product is that the records go all over the place and people can hear it from all over the world, as opposed to just wherever they tour. You know, they can only be in one place at one time, but their record can be in 50, 100 places at one time. And through these distribution networks, it's kind of like a I don't know what to label it. I don't know if I should label it, but you know, kind of like a mutual, I wouldn't say a mutual aid network, but it feels like it, you know.
Co-op.
Yeah, like a co-op, yeah.
I mean, it's interesting, and I don't know how recent this is in the region, but there's definitely long histories of that, I think, particularly between Europe and North America, like these distribution networks that connected together a lot of small indie labels on both sides of the Atlantic, and some famous ones, right? It's like Discord record for, and so, well, anyways, that's a way of doing business, which I think is important when you're really dealing with low numbers of sales, and you really want to maintain a kind of independence.
Yeah, there have been like companies that have been set up that offer bands a way to do pre-order only vinyl record releases, but then I think the cut tends to be quite high with those companies because they are charging you with the expectation that you might not get more than 40 orders. And so they're going to be charging almost sale price, like MSRP price for the production themselves. So they're basically releasing for free in a way. And I think some of them might also be predatory in the sense that they might keep copyright in some senses, but not sure about that. I think with these, it's cool to see the internet, I speak. I think social media mainly allows for these people to connect with each other and find these networks and then join and to enable bands from anywhere to then go anywhere. I think Johnny from Desperate Infant was telling me like sometimes the record is the first thing to hit the shore. And then the band follows closely afterwards. Sometimes it's the other way around. The band goes first. I think traditionally the band goes first. They promote their music through playing a show outside of their home base, and then people buy the record there, and then the record shop says, "Hey, I want to stock these." But then with the record network, it goes the other way around. The record hits the shop first. People, and then those record shop owners are not, you know, they're curators themselves in a way. They curate their own shops and they recommend this. Hey, have you seen this cool new record that I also helped make? You know, like, hey, you should check them out. And then when there's enough fans, they'll be like, hey, maybe we could bring you in. Or if there's a tour, they just be like, hey, you should slot us in between these two dates. And they end up being able to go all over the place.
I guess that fits in as well with like shifts in the way people consume music and the role of recorded music for all those bands right now versus the past, where in the past, of course, the main product that an artist would make was a record, and they would make their money selling records, and of course we all know where that went. And then, you know, there's been so much talk about how live music is now the bread maker for artists, which is after COVID, maybe a harder story to tell, but I have the feeling that basically what you just explained, Jonathan, basically really reflects the idea that records are there now almost as like a business card, It's like as an introduction to this artist. We don't need a lot, just enough to promote the artist in a specific context, and then yes, hopefully if there's enough kind of interest, and we bring them in, and the band can make a little bit of money by coming to play a show, selling some merch.
Yeah.
But certainly the money is not going to be coming from selling vinyls or CDs.
Yeah, but actually also like the merch and vinyl being sold at the show is probably one of the main sources of income.
It
as well,
is,
right?
it
So
is.
it is actually, it's more of a, almost like, so yesterday I bought one vinyl of Mongtong and Gong 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 because I really like the show and I want to have something.
You were there on Wednesday?
Yesterday.
Oh, it was yesterday. It was not Wednesday.
Both. It was both.
No.
We went yesterday.
I
Yeah.
wanted to go.
Yeah, but yeah, so to buy a record is actually almost not really to listen to it because you can listen to it anywhere.
Yeah.
It's actually like a kind of a physical thing to
Yeah.
remember the show by, really, and also like it's kind of like, you know, you want to support your bands that you like. So I think it's definitely like a consumerist choice of like, if I'm gonna spend some money, I'd rather want it to go directly to the band selling merch on the show. So
Yeah.
And sometimes the artists, they might have a few products,
Yeah.
and then you can choose one.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
if you're like a super huge fan, then you probably get everything.
Oh, someone did yesterday.
Yeah.
Like I saw them lay out all the
Okay.
they bought like all the cassettes and the records, and then they laid them out on the subwoofer, and then the two band members like just like took turns signing up
Wow,
everything,
right.
Yeah.
which is interesting. Actually, Chung, I was wondering, do you have any questions for us from the panel that you didn't manage to ask us during
During the
KISMIF?
panel?
Yeah. Or about our
That's a
presentations
long
in
time
general.
ago.
It's a while. I know because
He
I don't think
prepared another
I could
question.
actually remember that.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah. So I can ask the next question. I think I also hear some of like the negotiation that you guys been talking about, the money, the arts. So would you say negotiation is bound to exist when musicians practice indie? What sort of challenge and opportunities are faced by these musicians?
Negotiations.
I think maybe in the context of mainland China or Shanghai specifically, I think that the case of Yuyintang, which is a live house, can we use the term live house here?
Of course.
Which is just a live music venue used in East Asia usually. So Yuyintang is one of the earliest kind of indie live houses in Shanghai. They started in 2006, kind of on the outskirts of Shanghai.
Yeah.
They had a warehouse venue at first,
Yeah.
but then a year later they got shut down by the police because it wasn't licensed, and so it was kind of like this kind of DIY format at first. Then actually they got invited by the local government, or like they kind of built up a better relation with the local government, and they started a new venue, a smaller one, which had a cheaper license, or at least they could pay the license there, in a more gentrifying area. And so that was like 2007, and that has been like one of the longest running live houses in Shanghai, and it really has built up this kind of underground status, even though like of course now it's a licensed venue. And they've been like very very important for nurturing the scene, and like especially smaller bands. So this venue in particular has maybe capacity of like 100 people. So that's definitely like smaller bands. But right now you also see they opened a new venue for like 200 to 300 people capacity. Other venues have opened, of course, like way larger things as well. And last year they actively cooperate with the local government in a government-owned building, and now they're organizing events there as well. So actually you see like these kind of independent organizations like Yuyintang, they are much more like collaborating. I mean, obviously this is due to like the political economic context. but so like the sense of independence is not necessarily like cut off from any other sources like government funding or government ownership. But it is also like really in collaboration. So that's the kind of like maybe negotiation that you were talking about. Unfortunately, like this venue that opened in 2007 on Kaishan Tian, it got shut down. It got closed this year as well. So the scene kind of lost a very important landmark there. But yeah. So maybe that's kind of like the collaboration or negotiation that these kinds of organizations also have to go through. And it's changing over like the course of years, of course.
The struggle of venue in the local scene, that is exactly previous stage in Taiwan, because the legalization of live venue, we already fight for more than 10 years. So nowadays they all most of them move to the new place built by our government, like Taipei Popular Music Center and Kaohsiung Popular Music Center. So that is my another research project. I already read about this. I call it as the gentrification of live house. So nowadays we have many new venue in Taipei Popular Music Center. Next time you can visit. This year just opened as like Sub and another one like Kafuka by the Sea. Used to be in Gongguan. Now he has two shops. One is in Taipei Popular Center. One is in Kaohsiung Popular Center. So that's it. They move out from the original place and to the new place and kind of cooperate with government.
And also like they become very important branding opportunities for local government as well.
Sure. But I want to talk about another negotiation issue in Taiwan, because in recent year, the most important negotiation within indie music scene is whether you want to apply for the subsidy from the government. Because this subsidy policy already began since 2007, so already more than 15 years. So in the beginning, the money is few. But after 3 years, the money is huge. So, originally some indie bands, they say, we don't like to our album print as supported by the Ministry of Culture. But after many years, some bands, they got support from the subsidy and they can release their album and have the money to shoot music video and have the money to tour abroad. Wow. And so many bands go big. So the original band, their original standpoint is shaking. They think we should apply too. That is easier to begin our career, and we don't have to do another job. We can just do our music career if we have the support by the subsidy. So that is over the past 10 years, many bands supported by the subsidy, and then that's why now we have a wave of the rising scene in Taiwan. There are so many indie music, just like just like go into the mainstream market.
I have a bit of a go ahead.
Can I say something based on that? So I think there is like two things that really kind of link to what I heard from in the field. So firstly is when I'm writing the thesis, one thing is the like you said about the money. Once you get the money, it's very difficult to stay still
Yeah.
I speak to this manager. She's actually also based in Shanghai, and I was asking, so what's the kind of the challenge that you are having? Because she had a few bands, they are kind of going like a quite nice place, but not huge. It's like in the middle. So I asked this question, and then she said like, so there are many like a big company come to see her, and then asking if you like to cooperate with us. She got so many this kind of offer, and for her it's very difficult to decide because on the one hand, if I got the money, the band, they can produce better music, have better production, better team to help with music videos. Like everything is going to be really good for the musician. But at the same time, as long as you sign the deal, you lost your power, you lost your autonomy. So she was saying... She was, sorry?
Or part of the autonomy.
Yeah. She was just saying, I want the money so bad, but at the same time, I have to like keep not signing it. Like they're, how can I say? It's almost like just like a trap, and you don't know if that's a trap or not. So that kind of situation. And the other thing, like when you mentioned about the government, for me, it sounds, in my case, it's like the talent show in
mainland China, like the rap of China, the voice of China.
The big band.
And that, in a way, make it huge. And that's also, I think, quite unique within the Chinese case as well. That's the thing I want to add a little bit.
But I'm sorry.
I was saying, like, I think in Hong Kong, there's definitely not nearly as much funding as there is in China or Taiwan, I think, for independent musicians, non-signed musicians playing non-mainstream music, for example. I think an interesting case would be the ones that the one that is the most prominent, called Europe. I think the way that they operate is interesting because of the funding processes. They have to market the program to the outside as something that is quite not indie feeling. For example, instead of saying like, oh, we're helping a bunch of bands play better, they would have to say, we are incubating labels, and it becomes like an entrepreneurship based.
It sounds oddly like a startup incubator.
Exactly. And I think like partially maybe that's why they get the funding, like because they use these kind of terminology. And then like, you know, and it fits in with the government's, you know, overall push for people to be entrepreneurial or to you know, that sort of a thing. And
that is exactly the case in Taiwan.
I actually want to ask, you were saying that a lot of bands, they get funding to get started with their career. Do they ever pull out the in Hong Kong, like we would say like 丢盐水 is like a 丢盐水 is like the IV drip. So like the band is on the IV drip, because if they don't have the IV drip, then they'll they won't survive, right? So do they ever pull out the IV drip?
I guess pull the plug.
Yeah. Do they ever pull the plug?
You mean if they reject the funding?
If at some point they go off of the subsidy.
Oh, go off. That's in case in Taiwan, if you receive the funding from the government, they don't think they lose their independence, because the government is not a major label. They will not to interview in your production or control your idea. They don't do that. But the money is make something for make sense for them to do things. But the problem is, if you don't get the funding, you don't want to do anything. So that's the problem. So so that's what I worry about. If you only can survive because you get funding, then that is not a real market. You are not real survive.
You're dependent.
There's no market anymore.
Yeah.
We could argue.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting, the case of Taiwan, right? Because
Yeah.
as you just said, the bands don't perceive that they're compromising their
Yeah.
independence if they
Yeah.
receive the subsidy from the
Yeah.
government.
Yeah.
We could argue that in Hong Kong, the reverse is true. I think receiving some money from some company is probably going to be more indie than if you start to work with the government on some kind of project.
Oh.
So it is very context dependent and very dependent on the relationship and the general perception that musicians have of either the private sector or the public sector and where they're located in between.
Yeah, like I think I'm thinking of the example of the West Kowloon Cultural District.
That's the example,
That's
right?
the example for Hong Kong. So for those of you who are not familiar, the West Kowloon Cultural District is a big patch of land above a tunnel exit across the harbor. Well, from me, it was built as a district to support the culture industry, perhaps. Can I say cultural industry? And so for a long time, it was just basically an empty patch of land. The biggest music festival, Clock and Flap, ran for many years on that piece of land. And eventually they developed it more and more. And now there's quite a few buildings. There's the M Plus Art center there, and then there's also a big performance space, many big performance spaces, and one of them is the Lao Bak Live House, which is a small restaurant bar with a very nice stage. I'll admit, very, very nice stage, and enough space outside for people to kind of stand and listen to music. And so I remember when the Lao Bak Live House kind of first started, even before that, when they had this event called Free Space every weekend where they would set up a stage on the grass, a lot of indie bands were invited to play at these events, and the money was great. Way more for one half-hour gig than one band could earn in their own headlining show in a live house somewhere.
Okay.
You know, it's very, very good money, and the best thing is that they keep bringing back the same. They're not afraid to repeat bands every few months. You know, it's not like they'll get you for one gig and you'll never hear back from them for 3 years. You know, it's like, you know, you could play multiple times a year easily as a band, and depending on the style, they're really. One good thing about it, of course, is that they don't care about the style too much. You know, they're there to showcase the diversity. And but then one debate that happened in the scene was that how can we develop a form of resilience or resistance to outside changes if we're so financially dependent on this one government-owned organization, or even just this one organization. There were other cases where criticisms were received by different streaming platforms sponsoring specifically a streaming platform called Jux, and I used to work in the industry, so I know how they expand their market share, to use industry terminology, is that they are very okay with throwing money at events to slap their logo on it. And
Red Bull Music Academy is another. Now, they're no longer doing this, but globally they were quite investing into indie music in different parts of the world, in different cities, and everywhere they went, there was big debate as to, okay, do we accept the Red Bull money or do we not, and what do they ask of us?
So it's kind of like a Trojan horse, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you won it. It's a great prize, but then...
Well, I think the Red Bull, and perhaps Jux, is a little bit different from Red Bull in the sense that in the indie world, I think a lot of conversations were happening as to about why are they doing this and how long is this going to last. It was really perceived as a kind of temporary kind of marketing ploy by the company, who had no real interest in sustaining activity anywhere, right? That it was just like kind of one-offs here and there. And they claimed that they were building venues that would outlast the Red Bull Music Academy for people to use after the fact. That never really happened. So people were critical for that. Where, of course, the government, a place like West Kowloon and perhaps even Jux, they seem to provide, I guess, like a little bit more stability.
Yeah, that's the argument for accepting the support, is that it provides the bands and to extent other sectors of the sphere, the indie sphere, more stability. They can continue to work. They can maybe, I've heard people say like, I'll take these gigs because it gives me money. I can continue doing the music that I want to do. And in a sense that maintains their independence in some way, because their creativity is then enabled by this influx of capital, shall we say.
Yeah, I do want to also say something, because in mainland China there's also a lot of these competitions like Street Voice, Star Nest Project. I think some of them are also related to Taiwan and cooperating. But the thing is also with these kind of competitions, they have this kind of startup mentality that you just mentioned, this very kind of entrepreneurial rhetoric. And actually, so they market also their projects, also streaming platforms like NetEase actually. They have these slogans like realize your musical dream. And I like the term dream here. It's interesting. What kind of dreams are we talking about, really? Because dreams, it sounds a very kind of romantic, this is the independent musician realizing their authentic dreams. But in fact, this is a very entrepreneurial kind of aspiration more than a creative, realization of a creative dream that we're talking about. And I think a lot of these competitions, of course, they're stimulating the grassroots production of music, but also we do need to recognize that a lot of these dreams are also not realized. It's just one band that will eventually get the opportunity to enter the industry and get a really good deal.
Selling dreams.
But there's
they
a lot
don't
of
think so. They think that's successful in the market.
But for that to happen, 99% has to basically fall behind. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think it's interesting, what happens if that is kind of the mode of thinking, it's kind of a linear track from starting very small to a successful band, which also this is kind of an ideal of what is successful band. It means a record producing touring band in the industry that has a big audience. But there's different kinds of ways in which we can define what is successful, and maybe success can also mean just playing for a small crowd that you really like, and you're okay with that, and you don't have to sell a lot of records, and that's also success, right? And I think these kinds of narratives are kind of eroded when we're just keeping on that entrepreneurial rhetoric track, the startup mentality.
Can I add a little bit more about the competition thing? Like the streaming platform. So one thing that I didn't really realize before is people attending these competitions that also create their kind of social networking. That I didn't really pay attention to before, because that's how they know the industry.
It's a stepping stone towards the industry, and
that's how they kind of get to know. Okay, so I need to work with this person. I could talk to this manager. You can only seeing these people there, but not online. You still need face-to-face this kind of interaction, and also maybe find your group, your musician, your worker together. And this girl, she said she went to that competition at the beginning. She was really looking forward to, but then she realized this is just a fake stuff. Everyone is doing stupid stuff. But then actually she met someone that they eventually worked together.
Can I interject and simply ask then, what distinguishes this indie kind of practice from just what the rest of the music industry does? This model of, participating in these competitions or TV shows or whatever as a stepping stone is exactly the logic for somebody doing absolutely mainstream,
Yeah.
like
Yes.
any
Yeah.
young artist
Yeah.
who
Yes.
has aspiration of making
Yes.
it big into the industry.
Yeah.
Yes.
They
Yeah.
use exactly the same,
The same logic.
system.
Yeah.
And actually, I like have being someone who's worked in the industry, they appropriate indie as a stepping stone, like the scene as a stepping stone. You know, like any, you know, I've seen small artists being
Yeah.
marketed as,
Yeah.
you know, like independent and up and
Yeah.
coming and new and like authentic and all that stuff. And then they play the small venues. And then maybe when someone high enough notices them, then they can like, then the money comes in, you know, all the investment comes in, and then they can play the bigger shows. They can get the big marketing bucks, and then they
Yeah.
can.
But that's also
Yeah,
the
yeah.
thing with indie. It has become a brand. It's basically a branding strategy.
Yeah.
In some sense of the word.
It's been that way for a long time,
Yeah, of
right?
course,
There's
yeah.
a lot of scholarship that points to the
Yeah.
indie mainstream divide is very artificial because as early as
Yeah.
the early 90s,
Yeah,
Yes,
major labels started to buy
To
smaller
nostalgia.
labels that acted as A&R for,
Yeah.
you know, to scout for
Selling
new
out
artists that they could
Yeah.
sign on to the big. So yeah, that's why when we talk about defining indie, it's very complicated, and I think that's also why a lot of people have moved away from it, simply because indie from what and to what extent?
Independent of what, yeah.
Yeah, you know,
Maybe DIY is DIY the better word.
to some extent. It depends what we're talking about,
Yeah.
right? I especially us as academic, we see some yes,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
DIY is the better word. But if we are talking about a semi-industrialized kind of
Yeah.
form of musical activity, then indie is still a fine category as long as we know what we're talking about. But there's a fringe of indie that really wants to go it alone to, you know, to be as independent as possible from the industry, from the government, and perhaps I think the do-it-yourself label then fits better.
But also, I feel like do it yourself. Maybe you can comment on this. Is not that much used in a Chinese context in mainland China. Maybe the term is 自办, or like self-made, or
Self-made.
no.
自出版
Sorry,
自
my
办
tones.
自
DIY. How would you translate DIY?
I mean, in a way, it's just DIY. People
Yeah,
wouldn't
yeah,
really
yeah.
translate DIY.
But is
Yeah.
it used
Just like
commonly?
自己来，
But
自
you-
己
自己来
自己来，自己做，
But I
自己
think
干。
people use 自己干, yes. 自己干. People use Dooley for everything.
It's
Yeah.
more, yeah.
And that's why it's so
very general
complicated. So
category,
basically covering all the things that we're kind of talking about, from the music to the industry and to your spirits and to commercial side.
So for me, DIY is a very European or Western based.
It is absolutely.
thing as well. So
And also very linked to punk as well.
yes,
Yes, very much so.
So
that's
sort of-
that's what
And
issues
with
I
the
have with the
counterculture
DIY.
ideology, that kind of sort of linked. But then DIY nowadays is online. That's another
Yeah. So
use.
yeah, I review the situation nowadays. DIY has still have a new meaning for the
Streaming.
age of the social media. Because in my literature review, I found that nowadays, not only the independent artists need to manage their social media, the established famous artists, they also
also
need
need
to
to
DIY their own social media.
DIY has
So-
lost any kind of
Yeah.
subversive meaning attached to it, right?
Yeah,
There's like
yeah.
thousands of tutorials for
Yeah, yeah,
DIY
yeah,
knitting.
And they need to,
Someone should fix these terms.
yeah,
Then we need to like delete all the terms.
We can ceremonially start a barbecue and just like write the terms out on paper, like just chuck it in the fire.
just like Taylor Swift, she reply and write all his Instagram post
Right.
by herself. It is.
It's coming
That's
from
very
Taylor's
DIY.
iPhone.
Yes,
like,
yeah. So,
not someone else's.
I want to echo what you just mentioned, because I have another negotiation by myself to look at the subsidy situation in Taiwan. Nowadays, I think I don't like to criticize more, because some indie music band, they get the funding and they go big and very successful, just like Sunset Roller Coaster, Elephant June, and even Decca Jones. So last night we watched the Mondong show. Mondong also gets some few funding from our government. So the results is quite rich. And Taiwan has another award, is Golden Indie Music Award. They celebrate so many indie musicians, and nowadays they can survive, and they have diversified music style and get to know more by the audience. So seems like a happy ending or happy result. So I don't want to criticize more, but I reflect by myself why I care about this situation, because I think that is related to the dream you described. I think if you receive the funding, your dream get into more just one way. It's more similar, and just like Francois said, it's totally no difference from the commercial way. So the ways they're making music, the way they're thinking about their career seems like very similar. Go big, and make my music more welcome by the more broad audience. So the dream is like very similar and the same. So what I care about is, so that's why I will study some more marginal, more small group, because they will provide more different way to thinking about their career. Their dream don't have to be the same. The only way, just go big. That is not the way I want to find the inspiration from the DIY or indie music.
Do you think that there's the new kind of pattern of going big with indie, and I think you mentioned before that it changes what indie was maybe, and then you also mentioned in your presentation at KISMIF that you were following some musicians and communities that are trying to do things the old way maybe, or the way that they want to. Like you had the photo of the show, the gig Under the Bridge.
Yeah.
Would you say that, like, which way has the new way changed the ability for indie to inspire people to think about society and stuff different? A lot of people say that alternative forms of music and practices can inspire people to think about how they can engage with society differently. Would that new pattern stifle that, like stop that, or what do you think?
I would not say that have bring some new inspiration. I think what I approach that is, well, I'm curious about nowadays still have small group. They want to do things differently. I don't know. They don't make it kind of successful. Not so many people attend. But when I attend an event, I feel I'm touched. I just found I feel I talk with them, and every time we have different topic, and I feel inspired. Even they are younger than me, and they that is kind of touching moment for me. I can't.
Your romantic side.
Yeah, again. I'm too romantic.
No, but I completely agree. Actually, there's something touching. Or
since we talk about, I don't know, the younger generation, the new forms of indie coming, or the previous one getting big now. So I'm wondering, how long do you think indie will still be relevant or significant within the popular music discourse? Well, the way how people talk about, and could it be replaced and gradually vanish, or do you think it would develop itself with different forms in the future?
Yeah, big question.
Let's pull out the crystal ball.
Crystal ball. Okay.
Palantir.
But in the future, where is the future?
Yeah.
Where is the future? Okay.
Maybe indie, or what the word is going to be replaced, is going to be offline in the future. Maybe we
Okay.
won't say indie anymore, but it's going to be offline.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Good.
Interesting.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
that's the real alternative right now.
Yeah.
Is offline.
That is
True.
the material form of offline.
What is a material?
Material.
Oh, sorry. It's
Oh, I just make a big
physical.
red button in the
Yeah,
middle
yeah.
of the table.
Yeah. That's tangible. We need tangible and physical way to
Right.
interaction.
Right.
Yeah.
That's material.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
material.
So, for example, what would a material form be in our kind of studies?
Kind of a good. You need to do the field study in person.
Right.
Do the interview in person, not online interview. Or just collect the literature. Yeah.
Spotify data.
That's not data.
Run it through a machine. Run the machine through another machine.
You need to go to the show or
Right.
interact with real people. That's why I think that
There's inevitably, I think, as you know, our worlds are becoming more technologically mediated and more virtual. Like, I don't like the term, but we know what we mean. Of course, the physical offline, like old material kind of things are bound to become a little bit more, I guess, subcultural, and in a way to generate perhaps some new indie kind of or DIY practices. More
Actually,
so.
that value has gone up. I feel,
Yeah, already,
So,
right?
yeah.
Well,
Just
we,
like vinyl.
we have, you know, iPods selling as, you know, like kind
iPods
of.
now retro.
I'm not gonna mention anyone.
you want to show. Yeah, please, if you want to fix your iPod, please call Jonas.
Fire retro.
Cue mod advertisement.
Yeah, but there will always be these kind of revival things, and it's actually funny to see that things like the iPod, which was like brand new technology when I grew up,
Same.
is now already like, you know, that's the whoa, so
It's
material.
coming back.
Yeah,
Yeah, they always come back. Like Mariah Carey.
There will be a time, I suppose, when, you know, like running your Spotify playlist will be like, you know, finding a tape player and buying tapes.
Ooh,
I don't know, maybe
maybe.
it will.
think-
yeah, of course, at some point.
at some point.
But I think like with the offline
still
online
standing.
thing, I think what I have been observing as a avid iPod modder is that a lot of, like, for example, I just take the subreddit for iPod and modded iPods and stuff. People will go on to the subreddit and then they're asking questions like, I want to stop using Spotify. I want to start using iPods. Where should I start? And then like,
Download MP3.
and then, so that's the next thing. A lot of people, they buy an iPod and then they realize they can't listen to everything that they want
Oh, yeah, how does
because
that
they
work?
don't have the files.
Yeah.
Ownership is
Yeah.
at the end of the day one of the crucial sort of distinctions there might be between these new
Yeah.
or these old formats and streaming moving forward, which I don't think is going to go away as the dominant model of listening to recorded music. It's just going to have more different kind of supports, like whatever they're going to build it in,
Devices.
whatever wearable that we're going to use, but the model is there. So owning, and that's why actually I was reflecting on this as I got my Mod Pod, which I'm very satisfied with. I was reflecting on this as like what makes it special, because at the end of the day we're no longer talking about the same physicality or materiality as a tape or a vinyl or whatever, but there's still something about knowing that I own this music, that this music
Even if
is,
it's an MP3.
I cannot
MP3s
Yeah.
are very material.
Yeah.
actually.
because they're stored somewhere that I
Yeah.
can control.
Yeah.
Whereas
Exactly.
if tomorrow Spotify goes down,
Yeah.
uh,
You lost
all
everything.
of my saved
Yeah.
playlist is
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
never to be able to access it, right? So
Yeah.
there's this comfort in knowing that, okay, my music that I care about is here in this
Yeah.
device.
Yeah.
I think there's one side of the people who want to go into offline forms of music like tapes, cassettes, and CDs because they want to have a device to listen to music. Obviously not vinyl. You can't carry a vinyl on the train. But they want to have something that's separate to the phone that's constantly trying to get their attention. And then there's the other side of people, like I think myself, I fall into that category where I want to feel like I have control over the media that I consume, so to speak. You know, I want to know that if an EMP blast destroys the internet at 4 o'clock later on today, I can still pull out my iPod, which EMP then. But, you know, I could still pull out my iPod or at least a record player and then I could still play my record. I could still listen to it. Yeah. And I think, you know, this is getting more and more, I feel like it's getting more and more popular. Maybe I'm biased because I follow certain social media.
It is getting more popular, but it's never going to be like what everybody does. It's always going to, I think it's always going to remain niche, but that niche might grow.
But I don't know whether that niche will apply to independent music scenes where, you know, the scenes that we study emphasize in-personness and physical togetherness as much more than perhaps the mainstream can, where they're always trying to push the next technology that allows you to enjoy music from home. You know, I feel like a lot of the people that I've interviewed that are new to the scene, they find a lot of comfort and a lot of value in attending a scene that is physical, that is not only physical, but small, and small enough where they could actually get to know people. You know, if you go and see a show in the Asia World Expo where there's 12,000 other people, you're not gonna strike up a conversation with the person sitting next to you unless you're really vibing. But, you know, I feel.
I want to mention an example just happened in the end of August. You know the vocal from 透明杂志, Hong Shenhao, he has a new band Void. And in the end of August this year, he held a secret concert by Void, and he don't show the concert information in any social media. He only sent it by private message, and he asks people to just show the information to the friends you want to let know, and please don't upload to any social media. And he want to make it as test, see what will happen, how many audience will come to this gig. And in the end, the gig is held in the world. The capacity is 500.
Wow.
So what do you think? You can guess how many people come to the show? 500. Almost more than 400. Yeah. Because he is worried about if not so many people come, then he will lose money because the rent of the world is quite expensive nowadays.
Did anyone upload it?
No. He asks, so even I don't dare to upload the social media. I asked him, can I put it on the Instagram story? He said, no, if you can make it as just direct message. So that's experimental. And I think he's thinking very independently. He reflects about nowadays the social media power to control people, to think about in what way you need to promote your indie music. The same way, just like commercial promotion. So he want to experiment another way.
Yeah, I think that's actually in my thesis. I'm also looking at I'm more looking at the word underground, but how public online spaces and more private online spaces actually are ways in which people can differentiate, or like undergroundedness or independence, right? So actually, like the private channels like WeChat or WhatsApp, group chats, or even like just personal messaging. Yeah. Those are kind of like the personal connections now that work online instead of just like publicly posting it on Weibo or Instagram or Facebook, which is much more public and algorithmically disseminated as well.
But I think that's really interesting for these fans if they're going, because in a way, posting a picture of the band that you like to display your cultural capital, that's one of the things.
Hashtag.
Sorry, try to be cool. That's one of the reasons.
I like that. I like that. Trying to be cool.
Why people post.
We're all trying to be cool. Let's face it.
And that's one of the. But then, if the band stop them from doing this, then they don't have the platform to show this side of their own life. So I think that's quite interesting.
And then like in China, mainland China, the bands, sometimes they post the QR codes for their group chats, like the band group chats. So actually like the people that go to the shows, they can scan the QR code and then join the quite like private group of very, it's more like intimate,
direct.
Like those are the real fans that went to the show, scanned the QR code, and then you're in the group, and
didn't mute it immediately.
And didn't mute, exactly. or anyways, the point is you're in. You already got the subcultural capital. You're already trying to be cool just to be in the group. But so that. Those are kind of like also the ways in which the online and the offline.
You belong to somewhere.
So the title of this concert is Void, P2P offline show. P2P. He redefined what is P2P. So I think what we need, some artists still think independently, reflectively. That is quite critical, important.
So I think, I don't know, in a way, indie is about differentiation, it's about being different. And I think in the end, the band that you mentioned show another way how we kind of do offline gig without putting them online. And I would imagine there will be, or we can see if there will be new ways coming out. And I think that's the exciting the things that we're kind of looking for, and the people who are into something different. And that's the power, I guess, in a way, indie provide for everybody. So,
and on that note, it is time to end the Copy Top Gear. Thank you very much for watching. If you're still here, KISMIF was great. We would 10 out of 10 would go again.
Yes,
12 out of 10
we will go again.
We will go again.
The other option for the snack was a Porto Tonic, but I felt like it would really go off the rails.
That later tonight.
But thank you very much for watching. See you next week.